When a woman does one specific thing, something shifts inside a man that he cannot explain, cannot control, and honestly cannot resist. It is not about how she looks, how much she owns, or how perfect her life appears from the outside. It is something quieter, something almost invisible, something most people scroll right past without ever noticing it happening in their own relationships. Psychologists have studied this pattern for decades, and what they found is almost unsettling in how simple it is. It is not about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It is not about chasing or begging for attention. It is about one subtle shift in behavior that rewires the way a man's brain responds to a woman, activating something ancient, something tied to survival, safety, and belonging. Once this switch flips, a man does not just like a woman. He becomes emotionally attached in a way that feels almost involuntary. Stick with me until the end of this video because I am going to break down exactly what this is, why it works on a neurological level, and how you can recognize it happening in your own life or relationships, even if you never noticed it before today. Here's the part most people get wrong from the very beginning. They assume that men fall in love the same way women do, through romance, through poetry, through candlelit dinners and perfectly timed messages. But the truth is far less glamorous and far more psychological. Men do not fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with feeling. Specifically, they fall in love with the way a woman makes them feel about themselves when they are around her. This is not a modern dating theory pulled from social media. This comes from attachment psychology, a field that has spent over half a century studying how humans form deep, lasting emotional bonds. And what researchers discovered is that the deepest attachments are not built on excitement. They are built on safety. Now here's where it gets interesting, and here's the cliffhanger you need to remember for the rest of this video. There is one behavior, one specific pattern that triggers this sense of safety faster than almost anything else a woman can do. It is so simple that most people overlook it completely, yet it is so powerful that men who experience it often describe falling for a woman before they even realized it was happening. I am going to reveal exactly what this is in a few minutes, but first, you need to understand why the brain reacts this way, because once you understand the mechanism, you will start noticing it everywhere, in your own relationships, in the relationships around you, and in patterns you may have unconsciously used or avoided your entire life. Let's talk about the male brain for a moment, because this is where the real psychology begins. From a young age, many men are conditioned to suppress emotional vulnerability. They are taught, sometimes directly and sometimes through subtle social cues, that showing fear, insecurity, or emotional need is a weakness. This conditioning does not disappear when they become adults. It follows them into their relationships, their friendships, and even their inner thoughts. Many men walk through life carrying an invisible weight, constantly performing confidence, constantly managing how they are perceived, rarely feeling like they can simply exist without judgment. This is exhausting, even if they never say it out loud. And this is exactly where the psychological shift begins to happen. When a man meets a woman who does not require him to perform, who does not need him to be flawless, who does not punish him for small mistakes or emotional honesty, something inside him begins to relax. This relaxation is not weakness. It is relief. And relief, especially emotional relief, is one of the most powerful bonding experiences a human being can have. Think about it this way. If you have ever met someone who made you feel instantly comfortable, someone around whom you did not feel the need to filter your words or hide your true reactions, you likely felt a strong pull toward them, even if you could not explain why. That pull is not random. It is your nervous system recognizing safety. And safety is the foundation of every deep emotional bond that has ever existed. This is where curiosity researchers get pulled deeper into human attachment. Studies on adult attachment styles reveal that most people, regardless of gender, are shaped by early experiences of safety or instability. If a man grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, where affection depended on performance, achievement, or emotional control, he often carries that pattern into adulthood without realizing it. He may seek partners who unconsciously recreate that same dynamic, chasing approval, walking on eggshells, feeling like he constantly has to earn love rather than simply receive it. But when a woman offers something different, when she offers steady, non-judgmental presence, it can feel almost disorienting at first, and then deeply addictive. Not addictive in a toxic sense, but addictive in the way safety and comfort become addictive to a nervous system that has never fully experienced them before. Now let's bring this back to real life, because theory means nothing without context. Picture a man who has spent years in relationships where he felt like he had to prove himself constantly. Every conversation felt like a test. Every mistake felt like it could cost him the relationship. He learned to hide parts of himself, to smooth over his flaws, to present a curated version of who he was. Then he meets a woman who listens without immediately reacting, who asks questions instead of assuming the worst, who allows him to be inconsistent sometimes, tired sometimes, unsure sometimes. Without treating those moments as red flags at first, he might not even register what is happening. But over time, he starts noticing that he feels different around her, lighter, more himself. And this feeling, this specific feeling of being able to exist without constant performance, is one of the strongest psychological triggers for deep emotional attachment. This is not about being passive or having no standards. This is not about accepting bad behavior or ignoring red flags. This is about emotional regulation, specifically the woman's ability to stay calm, grounded, and non-reactive during small moments of imperfection. Psychologists refer to this as emotional attunement, the ability to understand and respond to another person's emotional state without becoming overwhelmed by it yourself. Women who are emotionally attuned do not shut down or explode when a man expresses frustration, confusion, or vulnerability. They stay present, they stay curious, and this presence, this steady curiosity, sends a signal directly to the nervous system that says, you are safe here, you do not have to protect yourself here. And when a man's nervous system receives that signal repeatedly, something profound happens. His guard begins to lower piece by piece until one day he realizes he has fallen for her without ever consciously deciding to. But safety alone is not the entire equation. There is a second layer to this psychological pattern, and it is just as important as the first. It is the experience of being truly seen, not admired for surface-level traits, not complimented for arbitrary things, but actually seen, understood, and accepted for who he is underneath the layers he shows the rest of the world. Most people go through life feeling somewhat invisible, even in crowded rooms, even in long-term relationships. They feel like others respond to a version of them, not the full complexity of who they actually are. This is especially true for men, who are often socialized to hide emotional depth behind humor, confidence, or detachment. When a woman takes the time to notice small details, the way his mood shifts after a hard day, the subtle things he does not say directly, the fears he hints at but never fully admits, something shifts. He feels seen in a way that is rare. And once a person feels truly seen, they rarely want to let that feeling go. This is where curiosity becomes powerful again, because you might be wondering exactly how this looks in practice. It is not about analyzing every word he says like a detective. It is about presence. It is about paying attention without an agenda. It is about remembering the small things he mentioned once in passing and bringing them up later, not to manipulate, but because you genuinely cared enough to hold on to them. This creates a psychological experience of being valued as an individual, not as a category, not as a role, but as a specific, complex human being. And this experience is deeply rare, which makes it deeply powerful when it happens. Now, let's talk about something that surprises a lot of people, especially those who believe that confidence and independence push men away. Psychological research actually shows the opposite. Men are not drawn to women who need to be rescued or who base their entire identity around a relationship. They are drawn to women who have their own sense of self, their own passions, their own emotional stability that does not depend entirely on external validation. This is not about playing games or pretending not to care. This is about genuine internal security. When a woman is emotionally grounded in herself, it removes an enormous amount of pressure from the relationship. The man does not feel responsible for managing her emotions, fixing her insecurities, or constantly reassuring her sense of worth. Instead, he gets to experience partnership rather than dependency, and partnership creates admiration, while dependency, even if well-intentioned, often creates emotional exhaustion. This brings us to another layer of the psychology behind this pattern, something researchers call reciprocal vulnerability. This means that emotional openness works best when it flows both directions. A woman who creates safety, who listens without judgment, who allows imperfection, often finds that the man begins to open up in return. He starts sharing things he normally keeps hidden, fears about failure, doubts about the future, memories from childhood that shaped who he is today. And when this vulnerability is met with acceptance rather than criticism, an emotional bond forms that goes far beyond physical attraction or surface-level compatibility. This is the kind of bond that makes a man think about someone constantly, not because he is obsessed, but because for the first time, he feels like he can be fully human around another person without fear of losing their respect. At this point, you might be asking yourself, does this mean I have to change who I am to make a man fall in love with me? And the answer is no, absolutely not. This is not about performing a role or suppressing your own needs to accommodate someone else. In fact, doing so would work against everything we just discussed, because authenticity is a core requirement for this psychological process to work. If safety and presence are faked, if emotional attunement is performed rather than genuine, the nervous system eventually picks up on the inconsistency, and the same bonding process can actually reverse, creating distrust instead of attachment. This is why manipulation tactics and dating games rarely create lasting love. They might create temporary attraction, but they cannot create the deep neurological and emotional bonding we are talking about today, because that bonding requires authenticity at its core. So how does this apply to real relationships, whether you are single, dating, or already in a long-term relationship? It starts with self-awareness. Understanding your own emotional patterns, your own triggers, your own tendencies toward reactivity or withdrawal gives you the ability to show up more consciously with the people you care about. It means noticing when you react out of fear versus when you respond from a grounded place. It means creating space for someone to be imperfect without immediately labeling them as wrong or inadequate. It means listening not to respond, but to genuinely understand. These are not complicated concepts, but they require consistent practice. Because most people were never taught these skills growing up. We are often taught how to attract attention, but rarely taught how to build emotional safety. And safety, as we now understand, is the real foundation of lasting love. Let's go deeper into why this specific pattern creates such intense emotional bonding compared to other relationship dynamics. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, humans are wired to seek connection with those who represent safety and reliability, especially in long-term partnerships. Throughout human history, survival depended on cooperation, trust, and emotional bonds within small communities. A partner who provided consistency and safety increased the chances of successful reproduction and long-term stability. While modern relationships are obviously more complex than survival instincts alone, these ancient wiring patterns still influence attraction today. This is why grand romantic gestures might create excitement, but they rarely create the deep, lasting attachment that comes from consistent emotional safety over time. Now, here's something important to understand about timing and consistency, because this is where many people misunderstand the entire concept. This psychological bonding does not happen from a single interaction. It happens through repeated experiences over time. Each time a man experiences safety, understanding, and acceptance from a woman, it reinforces a neurological pattern that strengthens attachment. This is similar to how trust is built in any relationship, through consistent actions rather than isolated moments. A single kind gesture might create a positive impression, but repeated emotional attunement creates a lasting bond that becomes difficult to replicate elsewhere. This is why some men describe feeling like they cannot imagine being with anyone else after experiencing this kind of connection. It is not because the woman is objectively perfect, but because the consistent emotional safety she provides has become deeply intertwined with his sense of comfort and security. This also explains why breakups involving this kind of deep attachment can feel so devastating for men, even when they struggle to articulate why. When someone has provided consistent emotional safety over an extended period, losing that safety can feel like losing a fundamental sense of stability, not just losing a romantic partner. This is why some men appear to struggle more after a breakup than expected, especially if they were not previously in touch with how much they relied on that emotional safety for their overall well-being. Understanding this pattern can also help women recognize healthy relationship dynamics versus unhealthy ones, because emotional safety should never come at the cost of a woman's own boundaries, needs, or self-respect. Genuine attachment is built through mutual respect and emotional reciprocity, not through self-sacrifice or losing yourself in the process of making someone else comfortable. Let's also address something important that often gets overlooked in conversations like this. This is not a strategy to manipulate someone into falling in love against their will. Psychology does not work like a magic formula that guarantees specific outcomes regardless of compatibility, timing, or mutual interest. What we are discussing today are patterns that create the conditions for deep emotional bonding when two people are already genuinely compatible and interested in each other. This information is not about controlling someone else's feelings, but about understanding how authentic connection naturally develops between people who are emotionally healthy and available for real intimacy. Trying to force this pattern onto someone who is not genuinely compatible with you will not create lasting love, because true attachment requires mutual alignment, not a checklist of behaviors performed by one person alone. Now, let's return to the core focus of our topic and bring everything together into a clear, actionable understanding. If emotional safety, being truly seen, groundedness, and reciprocal vulnerability are the pillars of this psychological pattern, what does this actually look like day to day? It looks like staying calm during small disagreements instead of escalating them into major conflicts. It looks like asking open-ended questions instead of assuming you already know what someone is thinking or feeling. It looks like acknowledging effort even when outcomes are not perfect. It looks like allowing someone to have an off day without treating it as a reflection of their commitment to you. It looks like celebrating someone's individuality instead of trying to shape them into who you think they should be. These small, consistent behaviors accumulate over time, creating an emotional environment where deep attachment can naturally develop. It is also worth mentioning the role of humor and lightness in this process, because emotional safety does not mean constant seriousness or emotional intensity. In fact, shared laughter plays a significant role in bonding, releasing neurochemicals associated with pleasure and connection. Men often describe feeling deeply attached to women who can balance emotional depth with lightness and playfulness, creating a dynamic that feels both meaningful and enjoyable rather than heavy or exhausting. This balance prevents relationships from becoming overly serious or emotionally draining, allowing both people to experience connection through joy as well as depth. Another important psychological factor involves respect, specifically respect expressed through words and actions rather than assumed silently. Men, like everyone else, respond deeply to feeling respected, not just loved. This means valuing their opinions, acknowledging their efforts, and avoiding subtle patterns of criticism or contempt, which psychologists have identified as one of the most damaging behaviors in long-term relationships. When respect and emotional safety exist together, attachment deepens significantly, because the person feels valued not just as a romantic partner, but as a capable, respected individual. At this point, you might be wondering how self-worth factors into all of this, both for the woman creating this dynamic and for the man experiencing it. Psychological research consistently shows that healthy relationships are built between two individuals who already have a strong sense of self-worth, rather than seeking validation solely through the relationship itself. This means that the woman offering emotional safety and presence must also maintain her own boundaries, needs, and identity throughout the relationship. This balance prevents emotional safety from turning into self-sacrifice, ensuring the relationship remains healthy and mutually fulfilling rather than one-sided. As we continue exploring this topic, it becomes clear that emotional bonding is not about performing perfection, but about creating genuine, consistent emotional experiences that allow both people to feel safe, seen, and valued. This applies not only to romantic relationships, but to human connection in general, whether between friends, family members, or partners. Understanding these psychological patterns can transform not just how you approach romantic relationships, but how you build all meaningful relationships throughout your life. Now, let's talk about something deeply relatable that many people experience but rarely discuss openly. Many people, both men and women, walk through relationships feeling like they are constantly auditioning for love, afraid that one mistake, one bad day, or one moment of vulnerability could cause someone to lose interest. This fear creates a cycle of self-protection, where people hide their true selves to avoid rejection. When this cycle finally breaks, when someone experiences a relationship where they do not have to hide, the emotional relief can feel overwhelming, almost like exhaling after holding your breath for years without realizing it. This is often why people describe falling in love unexpectedly, not because the relationship was flashy or exciting, but because it finally felt safe to be themselves. This is also why some of the most meaningful relationships develop gradually rather than instantly. While instant attraction can be exciting, deep emotional bonding often builds slowly through repeated experiences of trust and safety. This does not mean initial attraction is unimportant, but it highlights those relationships built purely on excitement often struggle to sustain long-term depth without the emotional foundation we have been discussing throughout this video. As we approach the later part of this discussion, it is worth reflecting on how this understanding can be applied practically in your own life, regardless of your current relationship status. If you are single, This knowledge can help you recognize healthy patterns to look for in future partners, patterns based on emotional safety rather than superficial excitement alone. If you are dating, it can help you build deeper emotional connections through intentional presence and understanding. If you are in a long-term relationship, it can help you strengthen existing bonds by reinforcing emotional safety, even after years together. Relationships are not static. They require ongoing emotional investment, and understanding these psychological principles allows you to nurture connection intentionally rather than leaving it to chance. It is also important to acknowledge that this process works both ways. Just as women create emotional safety that deepens male attachment, men who exhibit these same behaviors, presence, emotional regulation, and genuine attentiveness, create similarly powerful attachment in women. This is not a one-sided dynamic exclusive to how women should behave in relationships. It reflects universal psychological principles of human connection that apply across genders. Though today we specifically focused on how this pattern uniquely impacts male emotional attachment due to the way many men are socially conditioned to suppress vulnerability throughout their lives, understanding this also allows for greater empathy within relationships. Instead of viewing emotional withdrawal or defensiveness as a lack of interest, understanding attachment psychology allows you to recognize these behaviors as often rooted in fear of vulnerability or past emotional wounds. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide context that can lead to healthier communication and deeper understanding between partners. As we near the end of this video, let's revisit the central idea one more time, because repetition helps reinforce understanding, especially with concepts this important. Men do not fall deeply in love simply because of physical attraction or exciting romantic gestures. They fall in love when they experience consistent emotional safety, when they feel truly seen and understood, when they are met with groundedness rather than reactivity, and when vulnerability is met with acceptance rather than judgment. This is not about manipulation or strategy. It is about authentic emotional connection built through consistent, genuine behavior over time. If you recognize these patterns already existing in your relationship, that is a strong indication of a healthy emotional foundation. If you notice areas where these patterns are missing, this understanding gives you a starting point for meaningful growth, both individually and within your relationship. Psychology is not about achieving perfection. It is about understanding human behavior deeply enough to build healthier, more fulfilling connections throughout your life. Before we close, I want you to reflect on something honestly. Think about your own relationships, past or present, and consider the moments when you felt the safest, the most understood, the most genuinely seen by another person. What specifically created that feeling for you? Was it something someone said or something they simply did not do, like judge you or dismiss your emotions? Understanding your own emotional patterns is just as important as understanding someone else's, because self-awareness is the foundation for building genuinely healthy relationships moving forward. So here's my question for you. And I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced this specific kind of emotional safety in a relationship? The kind where you felt truly seen and accepted without needing to perform or hide parts of yourself? Or on the other hand, have you ever been the person providing that emotional safety for someone else and noticed how deeply it affected the relationship over time? Share your experience in the comments, because these conversations matter. And they help all of us understand relationships, connection, and human psychology on a deeper level. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to think about how you can apply these principles in your own life, not to manipulate outcomes, but to build genuine, lasting emotional connection with the people who matter most to you.